Hello everybody, welcome to lesson 5 for Warlords of Japan. Today we're taking a look at the story of Hideyoshi, and this is a two-part story. So today we're going to learn about Hideyoshi, and then tomorrow we're going to learn the second part. I mentioned in my greeting video for today that normally we have a big gap of time, sometimes 60, 70, 80, 100 years, sometimes it's several hundred years. In the case of Jimmu to Shitoku, it was like 900 years. So this is a part 1 and part 2. And so it's really kind of one long story. I've split up into two different lessons so that I can fit it into 2 different days. But it's really cool. So here we go. I'm going to go through this fast. So again, you can always pause. That's the nice thing about doing it this way is you can pause. You don't have to wait for me. Or I don't have to wait for you, I should say. You can just kind of pause. All right, here we go. Period of the Warring States. In the 200 years following the Great Japanese victory over Kublai Khan's invading forces, so again, that's a reminder of what we talked about on Wednesday, almost a week ago now. That was the last story. The shoguns of Japan allowed their absolute military power to slip away to the regional generals. When some shoguns lost interest in being military leader and pursued other areas of interest, their generals began fighting among themselves to defend or expand their areas of power and control. This hopefully sounds familiar to you. We saw this again when we learned the story of Yoritomo last week, when the emperor gave up power and just wanted to pursue peace and reading poetry and stuff, and left the fighting up to the families, which created feudalism, the samurai class. Now the shoguns have done the same thing. They have given up power, which is crazy because the term shogun means supreme military ruler, and yet they've given up their military power and let their generals and other people kind of do the fighting for them. So the period of the Warring States, notice that that's in capitalized letters. It's an actual time period. Period of the Warring States between 1490 and 1600 was a time of much bloodshed, uncertainty, civil fighting, and instability. Civil fighting refers to when a country fights itself, like a civil war. Remember, you guys will be writing stuff down in yellow, right? You got that? All right. So it was also a time when any regional chieftain with great skill and a little luck could seize power and become shogun of Japan. So it was constantly changing hands here. Constantly changing hands. I'm going to pause if you need to pause this, and then we can move on. All right, so the rise of Hideyoshi. One regional leader, Oda Nobunaga, attempted to do just that, meaning become shogun of Japan. Among his officers was a common man, not samurai, named Hideyoshi. A man of great talent, he had become one of Nobunaga's most favored and trusted generals. Many times he had proven his skill on the battlefield. So here's what I want you to remember from this. The name Hideyoshi, he's obviously the story for today. Hideyoshi was a common person. He was not samurai. I mentioned last week one of the greatest misunderstandings of the term samurai. People just assume it just means like a soldier. We talked about you could not become samurai. You either were or you weren't samurai. You were born samurai or you were not born samurai. So Hideyoshi was not born samurai. He was a common person, and yet he was a very skilled and very, just a really good general, really good, had a good mind for battle and war. During one battle, Hideyoshi had a river diverted to flood out the defenses of his enemy. His cleverness led him to become a popular general among Nobunaga's troops. So he was in charge. Nobunaga was the main general, and he was in charge. Hideyoshi was in charge of certain troops and regions of that. So he was a very high up, respected general within Nobunaga's armies. Now, muskets. A new discovery came to Japan in 1542 when a trading ship caught in a storm washed ashore. 3 Portuguese sailors managed to salvage their muskets and gunpowder from the shipwreck. They demonstrated their firearms, much to the astonishment of the Japanese. Muskets are early rifles. Okay. One observer reported, and this is a quote, "Light like lightning was seen and noise like thunder was heard. Bystanders closed their ears with their hands, and flying birds and running beasts fell before them." Hideyoshi quickly understood the importance of using muskets in warfare. Soon he developed new battle plans utilizing the new weapons. He thought, if you can shoot animals and they die, I bet you could shoot people. I bet you could shoot people and they could die too. And so he began to develop this. Now, they only had a box or a few muskets, and so they began to replicate these guns. And this, we start to see now here the idea of Japan taking something else and copying it, and making it better, making it sometimes better, sometimes just the equivalent. But they began to take something that was already manufactured or invented someplace else, replicate it, reproduce it, and use it for themselves. Because again, they're on an island and they don't have the resources to that a lot of other countries have. So in one battle, with only 3,000 troops of his own, Hideyoshi defeated an army of 25,000 by using musketeers protected behind movable stockades. The enemy could not fight against the steady gunfire and was forced to retreat. In the following years, Hideyoshi won many battles and conquered much land for Nobunaga. He was extremely gifted. The use of muskets changed warfare for the samurai from this point on for a while. It'll change in a little bit. We'll see that tomorrow, how it'll change. But for now, it was huge. And Hideyoshi was really successful and really, really powerful. However, Nobunaga has not the greatest future ahead of him. Although Nobunaga was named deputy shogun by the emperor, the fighting continued. Resistance came from other warlords and even from sects of warrior Buddhist priests who wanted to control trade in their region. Nobunaga eventually defeated most of his enemies, but in 1582 he was assassinated by one of his own men. Here's a couple things I want you to take from this slide. Things are crazy in Japan right now. Things were absolutely nuts. It was chaos. There were families fighting. There was people fighting. There was warlords after warlords. Everyone wanted control. In fact, it got so crazy and so nuts that Buddhist priests, who are typically pacifists. Pacifist means they don't fight. They're peaceful. They're anti-war. They had to take up arms and they had to start fighting because it was so crazy. They had to defend themselves, but that's how crazy it got, that these peaceful Buddhist monks had to start fighting and getting in on the action because their livelihood was threatened. It was absolutely crazy. But Nobunaga was assassinated by one of his own men. Not a good thing. But when Hideyoshi killed the assassin, his power and popularity allowed him to become leader of Nobunaga's army. So now Nobunaga gets assassinated. Hideyoshi goes out and kills him, kills the assassin. And that propels, because Nobunaga was relatively well liked as well. So he was murdered. Hideyoshi, who was very well liked, even though he was not samurai, even samurai looked up to Hideyoshi's leadership. So when Hideyoshi killed the assassin, that propelled him to even more popularity. It's like getting revenge on that, and that was huge. And so they, whoever it was, he just took over Nobunaga's army, and he became the general. Okay, now Hideyoshi is going to conquer Japan. In the following 10 years, Hideyoshi set out to conquer the remainder of Japan. His army of 170,000 soldiers, remember that's about the number that Kublai Khan invaded Japan with the second time, 170,000 soldiers. So now it's all, that's just Hideyoshi's army. Hideyoshi's army of 170,000 soldiers dealt cruelly with those that resisted. One obstacle was a powerful warlord named Yasu Tokugawa, who could not be defeated. So he was able to conquer all of Japan except for this one warlord. I'm going to refer to him as Tokugawa. And Yasu is his personal name, but I'm going to call him Tokugawa. He couldn't defeat Tokugawa. And in order to become the military ruler of Japan, you have to have all of Japan under your one control. He couldn't get this one tribe, this one clan, the Tokugawas, they couldn't defeat them. So Hideyoshi agreed to make peace with the Tokugawa and assured the deal with an interfamily marriage. Tokugawa was allowed to keep control of his region, and Hideyoshi then severely crushed all other armies and became the absolute military ruler of Japan. So he was able to make a deal with Tokugawa. You know, they had two people, one from each clan, marry each other, which essentially made them technically one clan, even though they were kind of enemies, but kind of not. I mean, they were enemies, but they kind of said, well, you know what, we're not going to defeat you, you're not going to defeat us, so let's have an interfamily marriage. We'll come to some type of we agree to hate each other, but we're not going to fight each other. We'll kind of fight alongside each other, sort of. And so they did that. Then Hideyoshi defeated everybody else and become absolute military ruler of Japan. Now, there's a specific term I did not mention here. There's a term and since I'm not in front of you, I can't hear you say it. But what is the term that means absolute military ruler of Japan? You all just said shogun, right? I didn't use the word shogun here. Why can't I use the word shogun when I talk about Hideyoshi? He was ruler, but not shogun. Although Hideyoshi was now the ultimate military ruler of Japan, he could not become shogun because he was a common man and not born samurai. In order to make himself seem, well, let me stop here for a second. To become a shogun, you had to be samurai because that was the head of the samurai. And again, you couldn't become samurai. Nothing in the world you could do that would make you samurai. So he could not be shogun. He had the power and the position, but he did not have the title. Now, in order to make himself feel more important, he persuaded members of the royal Fujiwara family to adopt him. This was just a ceremonial deal. Basically, he wanted to have a name attached to him. It'd be kind of like, no one knows who Mr. Lane is, but if I could get an endorsement from, Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, that Bezos says, "Oh yeah, Mr. Lane is cool, and I endorse him." Well, that attaches his name to me in a sense, saying, "Okay, yeah, he's cool," and it gives me credibility. That's basically what they did. They said, "Hey, we kind of include him in our family. We kind of support him," and so that gave him some credibility. Now, he told a story that before his birth, his mother saw a brilliant sunlight fill her room, though it was late at night. She then heard a prophecy telling that she would have a son who would lead a glorious life. I hope that sounds familiar to you. That story sounds very familiar to a season that we like to celebrate in December, right? The truth is, Hideyoshi kept secret the true facts of his birth. No one was sure of the exact date of his birth or who his father was. Now, in a society like Japan, it's called patrilineal, where your father's name, your father's family is the most important, and that's where you get your family history from. He didn't know who his dad was. Had no idea. That's almost a death sentence in this culture. You have to know who your father's family is. On top of that, he didn't even know his birthday. I mean, imagine being just nobody, where you don't even know when you were born. His mother I don't even know what type of relationship he had with his mother. He just didn't know when his birthday was. So he really, truly was of meager beginnings of life. Now, perhaps to overcome his humble past, Hideyoshi set out to increase his wealth and power to levels greater than any ruler before him. Prospectors were ordered to search for new gold and silver mines, and Hideyoshi personally claimed much of the new discoveries of wealth. A couple things here. He was so embarrassed about his beginnings, his humble beginnings, that he wanted to set out to become the wealthiest person Japan had ever seen. And so he overcompensated for that. And he went out and he sent people out, and under the guise of in government, go out and find gold and silver mines. And they did. And he claimed it for himself. Imagine our president, whoever happens to be, sending out under a government mission saying, "Hey, go find all these great things," and they find diamond mines and gold mines and all these things, and then they say that the president says, "Cool," and he keeps it himself. That we would be outraged, and it would be illegal. But under Hideyoshi, he claimed the wealth personally himself. I mean, one of his homes in Kyoto, he had many. Everything Hideyoshi touched had to be made of gold. Even the roof was gold. Now it's like not solid gold; it's like gold leaf, but it was still gold. Rooms were filled with bars of gold and silver and bales of fine silk. Hideyoshi also built the largest and strongest fortress ever constructed in Japan, the castle at Osaka. And I'm going to show some pictures of this to you either at the end of this lesson or tomorrow's lesson. We'll see how time goes. But there's some pictures. It's just absolutely cool. It's a touristy thing now, but it's still standing, and it's absolutely awesome. Now, don't think of a castle. When we think of castles, we kind of default to the medieval castles in Europe. This does not look like a medieval castle in Europe. It's very Japanese, but it's still considered a castle, and it's just beautiful and huge and all that. And I'll show you pictures. Now, tens of thousands of workmen were needed to build the 187-acre castle, which Hideyoshi made the center of his government. Double walls, deep moats, and a 100-foot-high tower protected Hideyoshi and his family within. Okay? Hang on, I'm going to drink some coffee. Okay. Now, an heir. Hideyoshi hoped that his son would become ruler, which is pretty typical of any ruler. You want your son to take over. However, when his son died in 1590, new plans were made. So his son was was in his young adult years, and he'd been trained to become the next leader. And he was going to take over not only the wealth of Hideyoshi, but also the power of ruling Japan. Hideyoshi appointed his but all of a sudden in 1590 his son died, right? So he appointed his nephew to become the next ruler after his death. That's a pretty sweet gig for nephew. Hey, Uncle Hideyoshi, how's it going? Hey, you know what? Your cousin just died. I'm going to make you in charge of Japan, and you can inherit not only all the wealth but all the powers. Like, dude, thanks, Uncle Hideyoshi. This is awesome. However, to everyone's surprise, in 1593, another son was born. So nephew had been for 3 years been trained to become the next leader. Mr. and Mrs. Hideyoshi, must have had a little, whatever, date night or something, and then 9 months later he has a son. And unexpected, because Hideyoshi's not a young guy. He's like in his 40s or 50s now, right? He's probably his 50s. And so he now has a young son. So he's like, ooh, yikes, what am I going to do, right? Well, the nephew's is an adult. He's been trained. He has an infant son. Of course he wants his son to become the leader, but his son's just a baby, and so he's got to make a logical decision. So because Hideyoshi preferred the son to inherit the throne, he does the obvious thing here, and he ordered his nephew to commit suicide, and all the nephew's children killed, which was done. This cleared away any argument of who would succeed Hideyoshi. I feel terrible for his nephew. His nephew's just being a good nephew and taking over. And like, sure, I'll help you out, Uncle Hideyoshi, no problem. Of course, there's something in it for him. But now that he's got this little son that comes along, he says, you know what, nephew? I want my son to become the next leader, not you. So, you need to commit suicide and all your family's going to be killed. Like, what? That's not cool, right? I feel bad for the nephew, but he did that, of course, because the nephew could always claim that he is rightfully in charge and should have the position, and he might kill the son or whatever. So they kill everybody to lead the way, and I think they learned their lesson from Yoritomo. Don't leave anybody alive. It could come back and haunt you. So I always feel bad about the nephew on this one, but that cleared away any argument. However, the heir is now like a little baby, seriously, and Hideyoshi's not a young kid. So he's got some issue. Now, to increase his power further, Hideyoshi's ambition was to conquer China. So he conquered all this. He got all his wealth, right? He's wealthy, but now he wants the power. So he's going to go conquer China. Using his military skills, he organized a crushing invasion of Korea. Though successful in Korea, his army was unable to advance to China. Disease and a loss of many convoy ships to Korean pirates forced the Japanese armies to return home. So he couldn't advance into China, but he did take over Korea. A second invasion was launched. Again, the Japanese armies quickly conquered Korea, but before any invasion into China could take place, Hideyoshi's generals received word that he had died. The invasion attempt ended and the army returned. I don't know if this is the general said, oh man, Hideyoshi's gone. I don't know if we know what to do. He's the brain power behind all this, and we're not going to proceed because we just don't know what to do. It could have been that, or it could have been, man, that old man's crazy. We're not going into China. Let's forget this and let's go home. I don't know. It was probably both. Who knows? But they decided not to invade China, and they went back home. Now, Japan had been strengthened and enriched by Hideyoshi's rule. The period of the warring states had ended, but a peaceful future for Japan was left uncertain. Now, instead of a period there, I should almost put a ... because there's a second part of this story that I'm going to tell you tomorrow. It has to do with the character that we learned about today briefly, and he's going to become the next ruler of Japan, and it's going to shape Japan for a very, very long time, and even affect how Japan is today. So we're going to learn about that tomorrow. But for now, that's it. So at this point, you have, I forgot. Yeah, sorry. Here we go. So this is the castle at Osaka. Remember I mentioned that tower that he had, this 100-foot high tower. That's right in the middle of the picture there. Can I zoom on this? Oh, no, I can't. I'm sorry. Okay. So that's that middle tower right there. And you can see these moats. If you look over on the bottom left-hand side, you see kind of a road going into the castle. And look at those trees. So those trees are, taller than people are, right? So imagine using that scale. Look how tall those walls actually are. Pretty tall, and they're almost straight up and down. So you can see here's another picture of a close-up of the wall and one of the guard towers on the corner. really, really steep walls there. So it's almost, I won't say impossible, but almost impossible to break in. And here's that door. You can kind of see how thick the door is, the gate, one of the gates. So, and there's that tower. So you can even see some of the gold leaf. This is, again, the castle at Osaka. That's looking up at the tower. Really, really cool. So that's the castle of Osaka. Okay, so you have your 6-point quiz. Remember to do this. You've got 2 attempts to take it. Most of you have been doing really, really well on these. Keep going. And again, don't wait to do it. Just do it right now while it's fresh in your brain. You can use your notes. And if you have any questions about this, let me know. But here is your code for the quiz today, 2285. So take the quiz. There's your code. And that is that. All right. I will talk to you tomorrow. Hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. I miss you guys, and I will talk to you tomorrow. See ya.